Hello and welcome to this, the 168th edition of Old Romans Unscripted. Greetings to our panel.
Hello.
Hello.
I appear to be having the same troubles I did the last time. All I can see is green, so I hope you can see me.
Yes, we can. And you're perfectly central to your screen, so that's fine.
There we are.
And Father Thomas, you're all right?
Yeah, doing okay.
Good. Okay, so that's sound check done. Screen and sound check done. We're good to go. Greetings to our viewers, as always. As we always say, please don't be shy. Say hi. Post in the comments where you're viewing from. Greetings to Peggy in South Tennessee. I think, if I remember rightly, East Tennessee? East Tennessee could be. Anne in Ireland. Message from Peggy. It's been a rough week in the Diocese of Knoxville. Yeah, well, it's been a very full-on week everywhere this week. Greetings to Mary. Hello to Mama. Yes, it's been quite a week for the news. I don't really know quite where to start. But I think we'll start with news on your side of the pond. Reference the Supreme Court rulings this week, which seem to have caused a little controversy, even though they seem quite commonsensical to myself. But for those of you who don't reside in the States, the Supreme Court has ruled against affirmative admissions for universities. So universities won't be able to have racial quotas, but instead will offer places to students on merit, i.e. on their qualification and suitability to go to university. That's the first one. And this was brought to the Supreme Court by Asian students, a group of Asian students who realized, analyzing the admission statistics at Harvard University, that they were being discriminated against, because even though many of them, or most of them, were more than qualified and suitable candidates, they weren't being offered places. And then it came to light, of course, that places were being offered to other candidates less able and qualified. So this has caused some uproar, particularly by those who believe in positive discrimination. Positive discrimination, of course, is where you weigh admissions procedures in favor of hitting racial quotas or other such monikers as one might want, for example, female students. So, as I say, this seems more than an equitable decision to me. But what do the panel think on the other side of the Atlantic?
I mean, as you said, it's common sense. Therefore, it's not going to be liked. It's this notion of, and if people were actively discriminated because of the, for example, if you had an Asian student who was, well, in fact, this is the case, that was more than able, but because other quotas weren't there, they were not given the place at university because they had to satisfy the numbers for another group with, less academic success in the past. Then, of course, I mean, you're there not because of your race, you're there because of your academic ability. One of the so-called top universities in the country. Surely for a seat of learning, held in high regard and esteem. They should be striving for the creme de la creme, and not discriminating against people who speak French. Sorry. But it just seems nonsense, the fact that this happened in the first place. Now, of course, there was institutional racial discrimination in the past, but there are other laws to prevent that from happening. So yeah, I mean, to me, it just makes sense. But of course, there's a backlash against it, and I've yet to hear a convincing argument of why it should have been kept. But it's everywhere. It's you look at our current vice president, clearly, in my opinion, unfit for the job, but she's there because she's biracial and female. To my estimation, that's what happened. And you see it the other side of the pond too. With the Tory front bench, people are there to tick boxes rather than ability to lead and to serve. At the end of the day, we want the right person for the job. I mean, and the rest is window dressing. It shouldn't matter, but by making it matter, it seems to matter more, and therefore the whole thing just becomes a mess. Ability to do the job should be the only criteria, either in employment or in a place of higher learning, or for anything. I mean, if I ran a university, or if I ran a government, or if I run a business, I would want the best people there, and I would want it for the success of the business, their race, their self-identification, their sex, doesn't matter, because it's immaterial to the success of the business or the country or the institution. That should be paramount. To me, all of this is common. I don't even know why we're talking about it. I find it difficult to talk about it because it's so obvious. But
you've done quite well for about 5 minutes or so.
But I feel as if I'm just going in circles stating, as Basil Fawlty once said, the bleeding obvious.
I mean, right. So it's I mean, to state the obvious, I don't know, maybe our viewers may not be aware. The government's racist. Just gonna throw that one out there. And the reason why we are in the situation we're in is because of racism. And the government does not want us unified. If the government knows if we get unified, we would be able to see where the tyranny is and be able to correct it. But if we're divided upon race and other issues, we will never be able to take over our government and steer it in the right direction it needs. So they put these dividers within us to keep us separated, to keep us in small numbers of control. Hence why we've had the racial problems we've had since our conception, since the beginning of this country's founding, and even just more so this human race. You look at the issues that have divided the human race. The United States is kind of the newest in the sense of world demographics for it. And we've really amplified the problems in such a short period of time. So that's why the spotlight seems to be on us. But it's one of those things where we need to look at the times where one could be judged upon their merit is over. It used to be said that the worth of a man was in his word. Well, that's over. The backdoor politicians, the greasing of the palms, the politicizing and demonizing of culture is where we're at. And unfortunately, we've been that way for quite some time because good men have sat by and done nothing. We have been ephemicized, and until we get good men to stand up, this is just going to continue. And, you know, the Supreme Court's overturning of this rule is nothing but showboat, pony show. It has nothing to do with actual justice, because you're going to see the left, which they're already doing, getting in their feelings, and I know best from getting into my feelings. You know, they're going to protest peacefully. And we saw what happened the last time they peacefully protested. But that's what the government wants, anarchy. Because they want us racially divided. We cannot be united. We haven't been the United States of America in a very, very long time.
Well, arguably ever. But I mean, I would say, you know, the ironic thing to me is that you know, all this is become an issue again since your first black president.
Why should it? Why should it even matter? Why do we need to even have the title? He's our first black president. Why putting that emphasis in the title makes it a racial thing?
That's just an observation. But the point is that you know, previous to that, one would have argued that everything was in place and necessary for a fair and equitable society to operate, and it seemed to be doing so. And it was only when Obama came to power, and then particularly when he left, that suddenly we seem to have gone back 40 years to the 1960s and the civil rights movement. You know, all these things were addressed over the last 40 years, and now they've all become an issue again.
I mean, look at Chicago. Look at how Chicago's going right now politically. I mean, we're prime example right now since Obama's been president. And just the complete, utter destruction that this city is facing. I mean, I'm sorry, but
yeah. Well, and look at France. You know, look at France right now, and the rioting has been extended to Belgium.
How many churches are burning right now in France?
I don't know.
I think it's like a dozen that are currently on fire.
But but of course, the interesting thing about that is so it all began with the police shooting a truant teenager who wouldn't stop for them. But that's not why these riots are going on. And as has now been observed, it's immigrants from, or migrants from Africa and the Middle East, young adult men who were asylum seekers, who are now rioting and causing the trouble. And there's, you know,
you mean it's not families that are victims?
It's not families. It's not
women and children. Shocker.
And you know, as you say, I've not heard about burning any churches during the riots going on at the moment, but certainly they attacked an 80-year-old priest yesterday, Father Pele, and you know, we in the UK, you know, the migrant situation is something that's pressing. It's something that's in our news every day. And you know, as somebody observed yesterday, you know, we're an island. There's only so many people we can take. We're now a population of 70 million, which, you know, by other country standards is nothing. I mean, as you know, the capital city of Manila in the Philippines has 40 million. But you know, as an island, we're approaching something like 1 million migrants in a very short space of time. And of course, there are all these young adult men no women, no children coming over from the Middle East and Africa alone, and coming in illegally, and coming in now by boats from France. And that's despite the fact that the UK government has paid France 40 million euros to try and stem the problem, and really for them to address the problem. And again, this is despite the fact that there are all sorts of international treaties in Europe that are very clear that when somebody petitions for asylum, they're supposed to do so in the first member country they enter, which for most of these is Italy. And yet, they're sweeping through Italy and France, coming to Britain. And goodness knows why, because we have the worst weather. If we have homelessness. We've not got a good job market. I don't know how many of our viewers would get the reference, but I'm not sure if they're being told that the streets of London are paved with gold, because I don't really understand why anybody would go to such length to try and get here, except of course that the difference between us and the other European countries is that we offer them benefits, we offer them money, we offer them housing, and of course they're not happy with that either. So they've been protesting here about the accommodation they've been given, even though and particularly one place was a former army camp, to which some said, well, if it was good enough for our soldiers, our servicemen, why isn't it good enough for them? So now they're being put up in 5-star hotels, costing millions per year. It's, we're living in crazy, as we keep saying on this program, but we're living in crazy times. It's all topsy-turvydom. And we have no clear leadership from any of our governments at all. And all the while, we can't afford, all the while we're spending millions putting up these asylum seekers, etc., and then giving £3 billion to Ukraine, to the warlord Zelensky, and we've still got nothing for our own homeless. We've still got, thousands of families subsisting on handouts from food banks. It's a crazy situation. Now, to move on, because there's a lot to get through. So the other Supreme Court ruling, of course, was basically a web designer who wanted to be sure that she wouldn't have to build a website for a same-sex wedding, because that would be contrary to her conscience. And the Supreme Court has ruled in her favor, which, of course, is interesting because that goes against other rulings, not of the Supreme Court, but of lesser courts. We all, I'm sure, remember the cake baking business. And again, people are up in arms. So on the one hand, because of the Supreme Court ruling in favor of the Asian students, people are crying, racism, when in fact it was a racist thing that they've overturned. And now, of course, people are crying out and saying, this is unfair and inequitable. And yet, if the roles were reversed, they'd be the first to refuse to serve. So if a gay baker was approached by a person who wanted to order a homophobic slogan on a cake, would they bake the cake? Would they agree to the order? Would they take the order? I very much doubt it. I very much doubt it.
Yeah, can you imagine a neo-Nazi going into a Jewish bakery and demanding that they bake a Happy Birthday Hitler cake?
Exactly.
I mean, the uproar. It's interesting to see how it's been nuanced. I mean, I don't think anyone should be discriminated against in the rendering of, basic services. I think if somebody walks into a shop to buy a bar of chocolate, it's immaterial whether they're gay, straight, black, blue, young, old, or whatever. They just want a bar of chocolate. The merchant has the bar of chocolate. Money is exchanged, and they walk away. I think the issue here, from what I heard, was it involved artistic expression, and that so it wasn't just, here's a Cadbury's bar of chocolate made by Cadbury, sold through me to you because you walked into the store. It was involving her creative design, and therefore a form of self-expression and freedom of expressions, and then it becomes a constitutional matter. So is she free to render her artistic expression against something she doesn't believe in or believe against? And I think that was the difference. And I think there's a point to be made there. I don't know how you put parameters on it, but I do think there is a point. I mean, if it goes against my conscience to design a cake celebrating Hitler's birthday, then I should be able to refuse to do it without the threat of prosecution. And I would. I mean, I would refuse to bake a cake that said "Happy Birthday, Hitler" on for anyone. But of course, I would be lauded for my stance, and what a wonderful fellow I would be for standing up for that. But no, not when the shoe is on this particular foot. So again, it seems like common sense to me. But then common sense is deemed crazy these days. So why should I be surprised?
Well, common sense isn't so common nowadays.
Right. Okay, let's call it sense.
Because it's interesting, because it's almost, we're comparing two different mediums here. And I think that's something to point out, that these cases, between the bakers, I think that, and providing a service for that situation in the website that this designer and her artistic liberties is pursuing and protecting, which is rightfully so, because it's two different services you're providing. And
well, I don't think it is. I don't think it is. I think if somebody walks in and there's a pre-made cake with nothing on it and said, I would like to buy that cake, and the baker said, no, you can't because I don't like you. I think that's wrong. But when the person walks in and says, I would like to buy that cake, and could you write "Happy Birthday, Hitler" on it, then it is a different thing.
But the point I think she was getting at,
if she had a sign saying "Welcome to the Happy Birthday Hitler Bakery," and she refused somebody, she's offering baked goods.
No, she's not. This is a website design.
If all they want to buy is baked goods, then they should be able to buy baked goods.
Confusing analogies now with the.
Yeah, we're getting mixed up here. We're blurring lines.
The reason I'm using that particular analogy is that I want to show it's wider than just a gay, trans. I know it's the hot button issue, but one would be lauded because it's anti-Semitic, and rightly so, and the other, just because it's a popular issue, is, by the zeitgeist is being hailed as atrocious and a horrible ruling and how unfair of this conservative court. And it's basically the same thing. She.
But she's trying to protect what she has created, and she has a right to that.
Exactly. Yes.
But it's because and it's two different things, because the web, the internet is, public and private. You have rights to what you put on the internet. You can get protection for that. You go through the proper legal sources, like she's doing, to protect what she's putting out on the internet. And bakers and other public servants, see, it's different, because when you...
hold on
I think it's exactly what I'm saying. But
well, yeah, I actually fundamentally disagree with both of you. As far as I'm concerned, if it's my shop and I don't want to sell my goods to someone, I should have the right to deny them. Because what I'm doing, what I'm offering, is not a public good in the sense of, you used a phrase just then, Father Thomas, a public servant. If I'm a private business, I'm not.
But that's what I've been trying to get at, is privatized versus publicized, but I haven't been able to get my thought completely out there.
I thought you were being nuanced about the nature of...
No, I was trying to clear up that we were blurring these two different cases and trying to separate them back to discuss the point of this person's website and the content in which she's created, and that it's private, not public, but using a public platform. But she still has a right to privatize it.
No, I don't think that. I don't think that was the point. I think as His Excellency said, it was about, because it was her personal creative talent that was being employed.
Right. But that's private. Right? Her personal creativity, like she's running a private business. It's not a public domain. It's not, a public good, as you pointed out.
Well, yes. I mean, that's how I would see it.
Right. She's using it's a privatized source.
But somehow we seem to have got confused. We, not us, but the general discourse seems to have got confused between something that is of benefit to the public and something that is a public benefit.
Exactly.
So that we have businesses and that we have bakeries, or that we have website designers, or etc. It doesn't matter what the business is a benefit to the public. Of course it is, but it's not a public benefit. It's not something that should be controlled. It's not something that is provided by the state. It's not something that is provided by the government. It's something that individuals may or may not, and are free to choose to have a business or not, whatever that business is. But I also think, likewise, they have a right to refuse to trade with someone if they want to. I mean, what happens if, say, you're running a retreat center? It's a Catholic retreat center, and two lesbians turn up on the door wanting to stay the night. And it's clear, they say, "Oh, this is my wife. We're spouses, and we'd like to stay for a couple of days and have a retreat." Now, what should Reverend Mother do?
Well, they can stay if they stay in separate rooms. And if they truly want to have a receipt and have no extracurricular activities going on, welcome anybody. But they stay in separate rooms. They abide by the rules of the convent or the friary or wherever, the retreat center, and they most welcome to have a retreat.
We would say that the Reverend Mother would be within her rights to say these would be the conditions and the terms of your staying.
Exactly.
So I don't see that that's any different to a website designer saying, well, I don't want my art, my talent to be, used for something that I can't in conscience agree with.
Yeah, no, I agree wholeheartedly. And there are laws. For example, you can't discriminate in the United States against people for housing. However, if you have a retirement home where you would buy a particular flat or apartment or condo within a Jewish retirement home, the organization has the right to say, we will only or give preference to Jewish people because that is the ethos of our collective establishment. Now, those things like retreat houses, faith community, or particular ethos of housing, etc., is fundamentally different from a shop that provides food. Just for the sake of argument, what if everyone, every black shop owner in South Africa decided not to sell food to white people because it's their private shop and they can choose to whoever they trade with? Well, then people would starve and go hungry. I think if you sell food, everyone should be able to avoid that unless they're trying to impose some other agenda on you. I do think that's a basic necessity. However, when it comes to writing or designing a cake or designing a website or going against the ethos of a particular organization, for example, the retreat center or the Jewish retirement home, then I think they do have a right to say, no, we want to protect this identity here. There are plenty of other options for you to go to, but if you want a pint of milk and you're the only shop for 4 miles walk and you're on an aid or something, and that's the most convenient place, well, I don't think you should be discriminated against for buying a pint of milk. If you sell milk, people should buy it. Now, if you go in there, dressed in a leather jockstrap, covered in rainbows, and with a whistle and shouting and making a scene and all of that sort of stuff, then yes, please leave. But if you just walk in, make a transaction with no other political point or agenda, or the only thing is that you want to buy that pint of milk, then I don't see why that how anyone could refuse to do that or should be able to refuse to do that if you offer it for sale. Or do you have it posted on the front of your shop, milk available only for a list as long as your arm?
Well, whatever happened to the decency, no shirt, no shoes, no service, right? Remember that?
Well, exactly. There you go. They still have those. You can refuse service for having no shirt on, but you can't refuse service to. I don't know.
It's like getting back to, but that's in a sense protecting what's right for the store owner or the business owner has a right to protect their business.
I mean, because at the end of the day, people will go elsewhere. People can go elsewhere.
But that's the whole point of capitalism.
It's a situation. If it's something like food, if it's something like that, that is a necessity, that's a slightly different matter, I think. But cake decoration or a website or is again another thing, isn't it? I mean, because that's not a necessity.
That was my original point. If you sold baked goods, if somebody went in to buy a loaf of bread from that bakery and just said, I'll have that one there you go, okay. But no, they want them to design a cake with for a particular reason, in a particular fashion, with particular wording on it, then that's a whole different kettle of fish in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. So moving on. So of course there's been a bit of a spat the past couple of weeks as various Catholic commentators have accused, or actually one Catholic commentator has accused other Catholic commentators of being heretics because of their perspective regarding tradition. And his Pope-splaining, but in this, I think the term he prefers to describe Pope Francis's actions is imprudent. So all these things are just imprudent. They're not necessarily proof of heresy, apparently, but they are just proof of imprudence on the part of the Pope. So Abrahamic temples, Pachamama, invalid masses, invalid baptisms, women lectors and acolytes, blessings of gay couples, pride masses, Vatican money invested in films of dubious character, communion for adulterers, climate change, beatitudes, changing words in the Our Father and other prayers, cancelling the traditional Latin Mass. And now, heal me with your mouth the art of kissing, because the author of said title has just been announced that he's going to be the new prefect for the dicastery for the doctrine of the faith. One Argentinian archbishop, let me just Archbishop Tucho Fernandez, who wrote The Art of Kissing, who is also known to be the ghostwriter of Amoris Laetitia and other theological tomes. He's going to be the new prefect of the dicastery for the doctrine of the faith. Let me just read. I'm going to try and find something not too salacious, but this is a quote from his book, The Art of Kissing. Quote, on the other hand, the one who kisses well experiences that his life is saved in every kiss, as if in each kiss he were entering into a holy place of pure life of redeeming grace. The only one who is fully happy is the one who enjoys himself, but in feeling that the kiss is building something permanent and eternal. Other quotes, kissing on the ear is very arousing and it intimidates the men. The penetrating kiss is when you suck and slurp with the lips. The penetrating kiss is when you stick in your tongue, watch out for teeth. And another strange quote, my boyfriend gets a hard mouth when he kisses me. He hasn't yet learned how to loosen his lips. Lovely. So the author of that filth is going to be the new head of the doctrinal office at the Holy See as from this September.
Well, I think you can kiss the faith goodbye. I'm not sure many copies of that horrid book he sold, but pretty sure the Dalai Lama has several. Look, it's now a mockery. It's laughing at it. It's laughing at us. It's laughing at Catholicism, at the deposit of faith. I briefly saw something this morning. I didn't have time to read it, but apparently the artist who came up with the work called Piss Christ,
yes,
is to be honored by the Pope at the Vatican. And for those who don't know, those who don't wish to know, please put your fingers in your ears now. But for those who don't know, it was an image of a crucifix submerged in a vat of urine. This is absolute mockery. It's a spit in the eye to people of faith, of the faith. It would not be tolerated in any other faith system. Could you imagine for 1 second? I mean, it's even impossible to suspend belief to even think about this. Could you imagine if it was an effigy of the Prophet Muhammad submerged in a vat of urine being honored by some sultan or the emir of some Arab country or the Ayatollah?
Well, or if it was the crescent and the crescent moon submerged in,
it's just, no, it would not happen yet. It happens here, and it's described as imprudent. Well, I'm sorry. Any other area, you would have been taken out and burnt at the stake for that.
Yeah.
How dare you insult? And again,
But he
it's
gets
not
away
just
with
the
it.
billion or so Catholics around the world. It's the billions and billions and billions and billions of Catholics and men and women of faith that have died for the faith since the time of Christ. Even the so-called Christians before Christ, as the fathers had referred to them. These men and women of faith who gave their lives, who sacrificed everything, are being spat upon, mocked, and laughed. Well, if it was good enough for Christ, I know we can bear it. But this is an outrage, an absolute outrage.
And going back to my original statement that I made earlier, all that evil needs to triumph is for good men to sit and do nothing. When you have lax Catholics, when you have lax Christians, when you have this division between Christians, and then you have the so-called leader of the church, the vicar of Christ, giving praise for sacrilege and supporting sacrilege and supporting all this debauchery. What do you expect? I mean, no wonder we're in the place we're in, because Catholics aren't Catholic anymore. Christians aren't Christians anymore. I'm sorry, but I mean, and I fear and tremble for my own salvation because of this. Because the remnant that we have of faithful and who are striving to live the faith, I mean, we're just not able to carry that weight. And we need, if more Catholics got it together and realized this Navasodal facade that they're living is actually damning them to hell and damning souls and damning the church, they need to get out of this. Supporting this is just letting the building burn. You're not putting water on the fire.
You're
not.
Yeah.
And if you can call this man in Rome the vicar of Christ and the Pope and say that he is legitimately pleasing to our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, that the Holy Ghost elected him and guided the election, if you can say that in good faith and conscience, and you do not have any doubt in your mind or in your heart that he is 100% legitimate, pleasing, and right in line with all his successors, then you can't, there's no way to get around it. Now, we're not saying the church is indefectible, but we're saying right now we're living through a crisis in the time in the church. Evil men have hijacked the church. Evil men have infiltrated. Just that's what we're saying. And you got to get on board with that. You cannot support this.
Well, I think to be fair to our listeners, I think most of them get that and appreciate that. But I think the point we would want to make is that it's not enough just for you to understand, but you need to encourage and enable others to understand. Because that's the only way things could change. And as Fulton Sheen said, it's the laity that must save the church. I mean, it's obvious that it's not the hierarchy, because even those who arguably have been attempting to have done nothing really. If you think of Athanasius Schneider, if you think of Cardinal Burke, even Bishop Strickland, we praise them for the little they do, but they don't really do that much.
Well, and then look at what happens. Strickland gets investigated, right? And he's possibly going to be getting removed. So, where's he going to go?
Yeah, but that's the
Vigano. What did Vigano do as the when he was in the States?
But this will be the interesting thing, won't it? If Strickland, for example, is now, for the benefit of those who don't know, Bishop Strickland is Bishop of the Diocese of Tyler, quite a small diocese in the USA, but he's been very vocal in standing up for orthodoxy. And in part, he caused the controversy on Twitter a couple of weeks ago with the Pope splainers and the traditionalists, because he referred to Pope Francis as being heretical. Didn't call him a heretic, but said that, what he's peddling is heretical. And he was the only bishop who made an actual stand, literally going to the LA Dodgers stadium, protesting outside the ridiculous so-called honoring of the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence. He prayed outside. He led the crowd. Thousands. There were literally thousands outside the stadium. As I said before, you can see the video of the two sisters inside the stadium, and there's a handful of people, and they get booed. But anyway, not to digress. But even though Bishop Strickland has done, actually in compared to his confreres, he's done great things. But the interesting thing will be if this apostolic visitation that's now been imposed upon him by ordered by Pope Francis, this two other bishops from the States have been requested by the Pope to visit the Diocese of Tyler, basically to conduct an investigation of what and for what, we're not entirely sure.
It was for financial improprieties.
So called, and yet we know that the Diocese of Tyler, of all the dioceses in the United States, is the most fiscally responsible.
But again, going back to, because they're responsible and they're different from the rest of the church who's spiraling out of control, that raises a red flag. And if they can find a way to get them on something, it's just like, what was it? Al Capone, they couldn't get him on anything else except tax evasion.
Yeah, but unless we digress. But the point is, what will be interesting is what he will do if he is reprimanded. So if he is deposed and told, right, you're no longer Bishop of Tyler, that's it, you're off to early retirement. What will be interesting is what he does next. Because one thing I will say for Vigano is that he didn't go off. He hasn't disappeared quietly. It's true, he is sort of semi-hiding, but he's not gone quietly, and he is now beginning to do something, it would seem. So he's just launched a new foundation called Exsurge Domine, and their first project seems to be raising money for a monastery for Benedictine nuns who are being persecuted by their bishop in the Vatican. And he's the first project of this foundation is to raise money to house them. So it seems as though he's beginning to take a sort of Lefebvrean stance. To provide some kind of episcopal support for religious and priests. He mentions priests on his website who have been maltreated by the church, who are Orthodox, and who need his protection, as it were, such as he can give. Now, it'd be interesting to know how far he's prepared to take that. For example, whether he would step in to ordain priests or deacons or any other orders. That remains to be seen, because that would put him out canonically. And it would be interesting, whether he would argue Lefebvre's position, as we would, that the crisis in the church provides the necessity for such an act. It'll be interesting to see, but it's I can't, we can't stress enough the level of crisis there is in the church. And of course, this new prefect for the doctrine of the faith will come into office a month before the synod on synodality, whose Laborum Instrumentalis has been issued, and contains clear problematic subjects: the ordination of women, the blessing of same-sex marriages, etc. It's basically exactly what the Synodal Veg has been discussing. And remember, I said on this program, and we've all said it at various times, the Synodal Veg was the precursor to this synod and synodality. And the only issue that Francis had with them was that they were beginning to run away with things before he'd had time to get everything else set up. But now, of course, he has everything set up. The pretense at consulting the Census Fidelium of, all those questionnaires and all those little meetings around the world of about 1% of Catholics who actually participated, who, of course, apparently all wanted tick the boxes for this agenda, this modernizing agenda. And that having been done, now the synod will go ahead and will discuss all these controversial issues. And this will all be presented, as it has been done in the Anglican communion, as it has been done in the Lutheran communion, in the Pentecostals, in the Presbyterians, in the Methodists, and all the rest of it. This small minority, but vocal, who, have a prophetic vision for the church and seek to impose it. And in doing so, of course, create schism. And the irony, of course, is that that's what people accuse the traditionalists of. And yet all we have tried to do is preserve something, so there is something when this schism happens, because it will happen, and Our Lady herself has told us it will happen in so many words on many occasions. So have other prophetic voices and saints of the church. So this is the reality of the situation we're in. And the reason why I used the crest of the 5 wounds on today's show banner, that was the shield with the crown of thorns at the top, and the hands and the feet with nails piercing, and a chalice and the host and the heart in the middle. That was the banner of the Pilgrimage of Grace, which in 1536 marched from the north of England, 40,000 strong, toward London, demanding the restoration of the dissolved monasteries and the return of true Catholic praxis in faith and religion, amongst other things. And I've used that banner today because I want to suggest that what we need now, all of us who would be faithful Orthodox Catholics, we need ourselves a pilgrimage of grace in this holy month of July, dedicated to the most precious blood of our Lord and Savior. We should take up perhaps the devotion to the 5 wounds and pray it with the intention of desiring God's grace for the church, because it's only with grace that we can see clearly the truth and what must be done. And I think, all of us on the screen and all of you watching need personally to realize this pilgrimage of grace by seeking as much grace as we can through the sacraments, availing ourselves of the sacraments as often as we can, and by deliberately intending to live a grace-filled life, but also to encourage others, other Catholics, to do the same, because this is the only way that the church can truly hope to be healed and restored. is if we avail ourselves of God's grace. We can't do it without God's grace. So we need this pilgrimage of grace. You know, I've mentioned it before. Father Ripperberger, remember, spoke about the depletion in the treasury of grace in the church today because of the blasphemous and sacrilegious rites and liturgies that are offered, because of the lack of faith, because of the lack of personal devotion of the faithful, because of the lack of personal commitment and fidelity to vows of the religious and priests. And I don't think it's not enough simply to offer reparation to the Sacred Heart. I think we really ought to begin a pilgrimage of grace purposefully, to receive grace and to spread grace for the sake of the church.
You know, today's First Saturday, and remembering all the graces that can come from a First Saturday devotion, praying the full 15 mysteries of the Rosary, meditating 15 minutes on each mystery of the Holy Rosary, doing prayers and devotions to the Immaculate Heart in reparation for sins committed against the Immaculate Heart. I mean, there's so much that we lose in our day-to-day life. You know, it's just remembering and taking the time. It doesn't take much time. It really doesn't. And the grand, you know, day of everyday life, taking a few extra minutes, you know, because you don't have to sit down and do everything all at once. You sprinkle it out through your day, and you know, just having those little extra prayers and devotions, taking the time, especially on First Friday, First Saturday, you know, other good days.
I mean, you mentioned time there, and I wanted to highlight today's Challoner meditation, which you will find on this channel. It's broadcast every day at midday. A meditation by Bishop Challoner, who translated into English the Douay-Rheims Bible from the Vulgate. Listen to today's meditation, because he talks about time and eternity, and he makes the point, you know, that time is short. Time is short. Every second, every minute, as I'm talking to you, we are losing time. Time is passing. And he says, don't get lost in wonder and dream about the future, because future time is not yet. The only time you have to worry about and to do something with is the present time, is the present moment. And he says, don't waste this present time on the cares of the world, on the things that don't really matter. Use your time, focus this time on the salvation of your soul and the salvation of other souls. Because we don't get this time back. We don't get this time back. And I think, you know, we all of us need to be aware of that. We haven't got the time, any of us, simply to sit around and do nothing. Even if we're not doing anything, we should be mentally praying, mentally meditating, mentally communing with God. You know, the first commandment, you know, is to put God first, hold God first in our thoughts, in our hearts, in our minds, and in our lives. But we need an army like that pilgrimage of grace in 1536. We need militars Christi. We need soldiers of Christ. You know, all of us who were confirmed, we were confirmed to be soldiers of Christ. If you ever watch the SSPX confirmations, particularly Bishop Tissier always preaches about being soldiers of Christ. We are confirmed to be soldiers of Christ, which means to put Christ first, which means to put the faith first. And it means, in our topsy-turvy, crazy, ridiculous zeitgeist culture and society in which we live now, in the present moment, in each present moment, to be faithful to Jesus, to remember our salvation, and to work and pray for the salvation of others. It's no more. There's no, we cannot afford any more any notion of private religion. We have to manifest our faith. We have to live it primarily. That's how we manifest it. We live it. We live it out, and we need to share it.
Couldn't agree more. The challenge is real. Yeah, we don't have the luxury of sitting back anymore. We have to meet. We have to take to the road, just as in that long march from the north to the south. Especially when the establishment is in error, and of course it pulls at the heartstrings, between this notion of loyalty and truth, but truth will always out. Here in the United States, it's the celebration of the founding of the country on 4th of July, that the people stood up to perceived injustice. They thought they weren't being treated fairly. And as we've seen from recent actions, as we've talked about today, I don't think people of faith, people of traditional faith, have been treated fairly. And all we want is a place at the table, and that's being denied. So I think we have to demand what is ours. It's been given to us. It belongs to us. It's our patrimony. It is our right. It is our destiny, and we need to reclaim it, and not let it fritter away. Not let those win. Truth is on our side, and we indeed must be soldiers of Christ and march against all forms of tyranny and injustice, heresy and inerrancy. That call is real. I do have to go.
Speak the truth. Don't be afraid to speak the truth.
No, say the truth.
No, I mean,
you will never be condemned at the throne of judgment for speaking the truth.
Exactly. The only judge who matters will not condemn you for speaking the truth. We're in the craziness here this week in Britain has reached a stage where, on a news report about the hardship and difficulty of families to make ends meet with utility bills going up, etc., were supposed to be talking to a sort of ordinary mother, and sure enough, we were shown scenes of doing laundry and washing up and things like that, except that the mother portrayed was actually a man who was referred to as a mother. I mean, even had a breast pump on the draining board. This is the level of craziness that is now in our society. This was on a mainstream news channel. Early evening news. And it turns out, of course, that this non-woman, this man, this non-mother, this man is a TUC union official. Is a political activist. Apparently is straight. I don't know what that means. And of course, people are incredibly upset because this is, disrespectful of women. It's disrespectful of motherhood. It's suggesting that motherhood is a role that can be played by anyone. It's reducing motherhood to household chores. Because this stereotype of, clearly this person is a mother because they're putting dirty laundry in a washing machine, and because they're washing dishes.
You really couldn't make this stuff up. Stuff that the feminists have been fighting against.
You don't have to make it up because it's happening. It's happening. It's on our screens. It's happening. And of course, people complained And then, of course, all the activists come out saying, oh, you're just transphobic, you're just this, or blah, 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 with their delusional nonsense. We had MPs this week in this country turn down a bill to require parents to be informed by schools of attempts to social transition their children. It was turned down. At the present time, I'm currently supporting a family locally whose 16-year-old daughter was socially transitioned at school without their knowledge, and who was then medically transitioned, taken to an alternative GP doctor for hormones. This is the reality of the present situation, and this is why none of us can afford any more, as Father Thomas said earlier, none of us can afford any more. Good people cannot afford any more to be silent. We cannot afford. We always talk about in this country at the moment the great silent majority, and we know that the great silent majority is not in favor of what the activists and PC elitists are imposing upon us. But the time has come now for that silent majority to speak out and to speak up and to demonstrate the level of feeling that there is, that is not in favor of these policies. And it's not a case of hatred, because that's the first thing these guys, reply. Oh, this is all hate. We're victims. It's got nothing to do with that. People don't hate LGBT people. People don't hate people who are different. The vast majority of people would let live. But of course, that's why we're being provoked now, is because actually how they want to live is now impinging on our way of life, how we want to live.
But going back to the beginning of all this, right?
I really need to go. I've tried twice before. I'm against the clock, but this is a good spirited debate, and it needs to be said. And you're right. There's no, we can sit here and talk till the cows come home, and the bulls too, of course. But we need to do something. It is time for action, because the other side, they're not sitting idly by. They're streaming this into our living rooms, and I mean, we have enough sense to see what it is. The silent majority can sort of see through it, but the impressionable kids that are watching this, I mean, because kids, as we know, are sponges, they're perceiving this as normal, and authority is telling it that this is how life is. We need to protect our children and the family. And John Paul II was right. Yeah. He was a champion. You can say what you want about him, but he was a champion of the family. God bless you all. Happy 4th of July.
God bless you, celebrating.
And we'll see you very, very soon. And hopefully I will have more time. God bless.
God bless.
God bless.
Bye.
And just to sum everything up, because I'm kind of pressed for a little bit of time as well.
Okay.
Going back to the beginning, right? With the university, Harvard. But that's the indoctrination. We are no longer educating. We haven't been educating for a very long time. Yeah. I think maybe my generation might be one of the last generations that got a decent education.
I don't think so.
I mean, because technology wasn't really a mainstream thing when I was in school. And so we still relied on textbooks. There was still free thinking. You could still have it.
The infiltration into the universities and the teacher training colleges was already there.
Well, yes, and I'm not saying it wasn't. I'm just saying, I think it wasn't we weren't full blown like we are today. No.
No.
So
no, but there were notions of there's no correct way to talk. There's no correct way to write English. Grammar doesn't matter anymore. Spelling doesn't matter anymore.
Right. And so that's why I'm saying, like,
all that craziness had started in the late 80s, early 90s.
And, and maybe just chalk it up to where I grew up, that we weren't affected. We're 10, 15, years behind the times.
Rural school situation.
So,
than the city where it was all going on.
Right. And that's the thing, where you're in the metropolitans, obviously it's like right there. So I think when it comes to that, because like why people, and I'd rebuttal to those who are being rejected from universities. I'm like, why do you care what university you go to? Because at the end of the day, it's a piece of paper. You're paying for a piece of paper that says you went to this university, and that's supposed to get you the job that you want. Well, that's not the case anymore, because we've seen how this indoctrination and this just inclusivity and diversity, it doesn't matter about education. It matters about who you are and what you are and what you self-identify as, and buying into the woke agenda that will get you a job, whether you're the right candidate for that job. Yeah. But so why are we're fighting a battle in the sense that you ultimately are going to lose, whether you're fighting it or you're in it, you're going to lose, because but
but predominantly the battle is in their head anyway.
Right.
The prejudice that they're supposedly fighting isn't actually there. And there may be vestiges of it still. Sure, there may be some people who are just nasty people. But in terms of the laws, in terms of the regulations, in terms of the general cultural expectations, those sort of overt prejudices and biases that were allowed to go on before haven't been allowed to go on and haven't been put up with for 20, 30 years already.
And that's the thing people don't understand, is that, we got to find out, and I guess, ultimately you just have to get down to the system needs to fall and crumble. And ultimately you just need to have that reset. You need to have that ability, because the trajectory that the Western civilization on right now, we're not coming out of this in any good outcome.
Well, I think that's endemic, I think, of the present generation and the zeitgeist is a kind of nihilism. And it would be easy, I think, for us, and particularly us older fogies, to just say, well, give up. This it's all going down the pan, and there's nothing we can do. But of course, there is always hope. There is always hope. And that's why I think if we manifest a pilgrimage of grace together, we can manifest that hope, and we may at least be able to stem the tide of things, and perhaps certainly preserve something for the future. Mm-hmm. Because I think you're right. I think ultimately things could implode. I mean, we can't even define what a woman is nowadays. Come on. Well, but aside from that, there's nobody's using any common sense with regard to Ukraine. They're all baiting the bear in Russia. But if he does become, what does a weak bear in the wild do if it feels trapped? It lashes out. Yeah. And what might Putin do if he feels he's got nowhere else to go and nowhere else to turn? He just might press that button. And he could. Certainly there will be an implosion then. It'll be quite rapid. But like you said, people aren't using common sense. People aren't approaching these situations with common sense. And yeah, there's a lot of stress. It's a lot of burden. It's a lot of craziness. And,
even in my own world, in my own life, just dealing with everything going on. That's why it's so important. We need to take a break. You need to go on a retreat. You need to clear your head. If you're feeling overwhelmed, if you're feeling burdened, if you're feeling stressed, you have to take that retreat. You have to take that pause. You have to take that mental vacation. And I want to encourage our faithful, the viewers, if you're getting to that point, reach out. There are plenty of good retreat centers out there. There's plenty of areas and places you can go to. That will take you in for a weekend, take you in for 3-4 days. There are monasteries, convents, friaries that will put on retreats, and it doesn't need to be like the notion of a group retreat. You can do an individual retreat or a family retreat. Get away from technology for 3-4 days. There are places out there to do that, and I strongly encourage people to take that. I mean, for us clergy, we're supposed to go on retreat every year, once a year. We're supposed to, and it's supposed to be a week retreat. But for everybody that's busy, take a weekend. Get away, go camping, or do something that will help you recenter yourself, and recenter yourself with the focus of being God first and foremost. Don't let this craziness sweep you up into the waves, because then you're just going to drown. So I think if you don't have anything further, Your Grace.
There's lots more. There's
I know.
To say, but I won't right now. Other than to say, I know I've mentioned this 100 times before, but I do intend to vlog. So do look out for that, because there's so much actually going on that I'd like to share my thoughts and activities about with you all. But if I could beg your prayers, and please pray for this family that I'm trying to support, and actually a number of families now have come forward for support. This ridiculous situation going on in our schools.
Pray your blessing, Your Grace.
Of course. Oremus. In nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. Amen. Pater noster, qui es in celis, sanctificetur nomen tuum, adveniat regnum tuum, fiat voluntas tua, sicut in cielo et in terra.
Panem nostrum, qui deum nobis hodie, et dimitti nobis debitor nostrum, sicut nos dimitti nos debitoribus nostris, et ne nas inducas in tentationem, sed liber nos a malo.
Ave Maria, gratia plena Dominus tecum, benedicta tu in mulieribus, et benedictus fructus ventris tui, Iesus.
Sancta Maria, Mater Dei, ora pro nobis peccatoribus, nunc et in hora mortis nostrae. Amen.
Gloria Patri et Filio et Spiritui Sancto.
Sicut erat in principio, et nunc in semper, et in saecula saeculorum. Amen.
Dominus vobiscum,
Et cum spiritu tuo,
sit nomen Domini benedictum,
et hoc nunc in usque saeculorum,
adiutorium nostrum in nomine Domini,
quia fecit caelum et terra.
benedictio Dei omnipotentis, Patri et Filii et Spiritus Sancti descendet super vos et maneat semper. Amen.
Amen.
God bless you all. Thank you for watching. And so this show won't be on now for till 2 weeks' time. Remember, we're now fortnightly. But I hope to, as I say, have something else for you to watch and contemplate and vegetate and meditate upon before then. Otherwise, don't forget that every day, the Rosary, the Daily Mass, the Angelus, and Bishop Challoner's daily meditations, they really are worth listening to. It's what's incredible. What always hits me about Bishop Challenger's meditations is that there's always something in them that is relevant to the contemporary situation, and even to the literal political or cultural situation going on at the present time. So please do. I can't recommend those enough. Anyway, it's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from him.
Until next time.
God bless.